Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to another action figure review, and today we'll be taking a look at the Bandai Movie Monster Series Giga Biollante, the newest figure in the Movie Monster Series Giga line, the first figure being Destroya. Now we have Biollante, and I'm really happy about that, because Biollante is actually one of my favorite Godzilla monsters, which, by the way, Bandai, when are we going to get a Movie Monster Series Giga Legion? Gamera 2 Attack of Legion turns 30 this year, and I just think that would be the perfect opportunity to do so, but I digress. Anyway, this monster comes from the 1989 film Godzilla vs. Biollante, which is one of my favorite movies in the franchise. I love Godzilla vs. Biollante. I love, the theming of, the dangers of, capitalistic greed being involved with, genetic engineering, which isn't too dissimilar to Jurassic Park, just, instead of dinosaurs, it's plants. I think there's a lot of really cool, behind-the-scenes, technical stuff. Again, one of the reasons why I love Biollante so much is because, just so much went into making Biollante what she is. Just a lot of people just, pulling, down, wires from, the ceiling and stuff just to make her, vines move and stuff like that. And just, Biollante is just such, a technically impressive, monster. Definitely one of the more impressive Godzilla monsters, in my opinion. And also, more just, cut content, too. There was one point where the movie was actually going to use, stop motion, and there is actually, test footage online, which is really cool to see. The original ending to this movie was also really cool, because it would have involved, hand-drawn animation, which, that also just looked really cool. And overall, there's just a lot of really cool stuff involving Godzilla vs. Biollante. I will say, though, the soundtrack, while it's great, there are some tracks that don't entirely, fit well with what's going on in the movie. The track Bio Wars is one of the more well-known tracks in the movie. Great track, don't get me wrong. But, they play it at, kind of, weird points. There's one point where, there's a city, that's evacuating because Godzilla is on his way to destroy said city. And, they play the song, and it doesn't really fit well. But, again, still a great track. It just didn't really match with what was going on in the, scene itself. The other thing that I'm not the biggest fan of, there are English-speaking characters in this movie, which, to be fair, I could see the complications because, these are English-speaking actors being directed by people who don't speak English, so especially in, the late 80s, I could see, how that would be, a little complicated. But their acting is just really, distractingly bad. I'm sorry. Nothing against the actors, of course. Again, there is some, language barriers here, but, yeah, it's, their acting is not very good. But overall, Godzilla vs. Biollante is one of my favorite Godzilla movies, and definitely my favorite movie in the Heisei series of Godzilla, but I digress. Anyway, I've been rambling on for far too long. Let's just get into this. Before we take a look at Biollante herself, I just want to take a quick look at the packaging because this figure does not come with a tag, which I get, it is a pretty big figure, so I'm not too upset about that. But for the front here, we have some really nice artwork of Biollante. I just think this looks really sick. At the bottom corner here, Godzilla vs. Biollante, Biollante, Godzilla 2026, Godzilla, Bandai, Movie Monster Series Giga, Bandai Namco, for ages 3 and up. On the top here, we have a nice picture of the figure, as well as a screenshot of Biollante from Godzilla vs. Biollante. The side here, we just have that artwork that continues from the front, which looks really nice. Same with the other side here. On the back, we have a picture of the figure itself, as well as some promo images here, as well as some other, information here. If you're wondering what this, cut is, it's also on the top here. Customs, I'll talk more about, importation with this figure later, but, this figure had to go through customs, and unfortunately, they did cut up the box a little bit, which is really annoying. I'm not gonna lie. On the underside, we have nothing, except for some legal information there. And that's pretty much it for the packaging. Now going back to Biollante herself, to start, we'll take a look at the paint And the painting on this figure, I think, looks nice. So as you can see, pretty much the entirety of this figure is going to be casted in this dark shade of green, which I think looks really nice. On the back of Biollante here, we are going to get an ever so slightly like brighter shade of green, which I think looks really nice. I think it does a nice job like adding more to the overall like look of Biollante here. Going to the vines here, we can see that the teeth are going to be painted this yellowish whitish coloration, and the inside of the mouths on each vine are going to be painted red with a nice glossy finish. Now going to Biollante's head, we can see pretty much the same with the mouth here, just more of this like yellowish whitish coloration for the teeth here, and a nice glossy red for the inside of the mouth. Going to the eyes here, we can see that they are going to be painted a nice metallic silver. And lastly, Biollante's stomach, if that's what you want to call it. We are going to get a lot of really nice oranges and yellows here, which I think looks nice. And that's pretty much it for the painting on this figure. And overall, the painting on this figure, I think looks really nice. Everything that needed to be painted was painted here, and it just looks good. So overall, the painting on this figure, I'd say gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the articulation, and the articulation on this figure, I think, is pretty nice. So, pretty much, it's just entirely going to be the vines here that are going to move, so we have some articulation here, and some articulation at the center point of the vines here, which I think is really cool. You know, Bandai knew this was going to be a big figure, and I'm really happy they just added these points of articulation to make it easier to, like, you know, put on a shelf or something like that. So yeah, again, just a swivel here, and just back and forth here. And same with the back vines, just, you know, a swivel, another swivel. And would you believe, a swivel, and one last swivel. And that's pretty much it for the articulation on this figure. And overall, it's nice. Could there have been more? Maybe. There probably could have been, like, a swivel here at the head. The original movie Monster Series Biollante had that, but not so much this figure, but it didn't really need it. I'm happy with just, you know, the vines being able to move, so yeah. The articulation on this figure is nice. I'd say it gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the sculpt, and the sculpting on this figure, it's perfect. You know, it always is. Bandai almost never misses when it comes to the sculpting on these figures. The key word being almost, but as far as this figure goes, the sculpting here it's pretty perfect. You know, I think this does a very nice job capturing the likeness of Biollante from Godzilla vs. Biollante. You know, the proportions here look really nice. Nothing looks too big or too small or too out of place or anything like that. The sculpting here is absolutely phenomenal, and I love it. So the sculpting on this figure, I'd say, definitely gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the detailing. And the detailing on this figure, I think, looks really good. So let's take a closer look. So starting off at the head here, we can see we have a lot of really nice scaling here. And all of, like, the ridges and everything. All of, like, the teeth on the inside of the mouth here. Like, the detailing here just looks really nice in the head here. You know, I think that looks great. Going to the overall body. Again, just a lot of really nice detailing here. All of, like, the vine detailing, like, towards the top, and all of, like, the ridges and everything are detailed very nicely. Everything here is just very nicely defined. And then once you get to the base here, they start to, like, turn into roots, which this just looks sick. Biollante just has such a sick design. I absolutely love it, but I digress. Going to the front of the body here. Again, just a lot of really nice, like, vine-esque detailing going down to the front here. And the base here, just some, like, more, like, root detailing, which looks great. Going to the back of Biollante, we can see all of, like, you could say, like, leaves here are all detailed very nicely. You know, all of, like, the ridges between them all look nice. And just seeing them all, like, overlap between one another just looks really nice here. So I am a big fan of how that looks. And lastly, going to the vines here. Again, we just have more, like, you know, vine on vine detailing here. Like the little vines here. Just looks nice. And the inside of the mouths here are detailed nicely. The roof here is detailed nicely. And the tongue here looks really nice as well. And that pretty much goes for the other vines. So I won't go into detail there, but the detailing with the other vines overall still looks very nice. And that's pretty much it for the detailing on this figure. And overall, the detailing here, I think, looks very good. So the detailing on this figure, I'd say definitely gets a pass. Now, we'll do some size comparisons. To start, here we have the Bandai Movie Monster Series Godzilla 1989. One of the things I always liked about Biollante was just how massive she was. You know, like, Godzilla was big, and then there was Biollante, who just absolutely towered Godzilla, and I just thought that was really cool as a kid. And I always wanted a Biollante figure that was in scale with all of my Godzilla figures, so it's really nice to finally have that. The scaling between these two is really nice, and I'm a big fan of it, but I digress. Here we have the original Bandai Movie Monster Series Biollante. You know, despite this figure being like almost a decade old, for what it is, it's still a really nice figure. You know, as you can see, it does not scale well with Godzilla here whatsoever. And like the painting here isn't nearly as nice as on like this newer figure. But still, for what it is, this is a really nice figure, and I am like a pretty big fan of this. You know, because like again, like the painting here, you can see like the underside of like the tusks here. You can see that they're not fully painted, where on this figure they are fully painted. You know, just like the vines here not being painted all the way, except for in the front, and then just like the stomach here just being this like metallic like orange. Like again, it's not like an incredible figure. This figure is definitely better. But again, for what this figure is, I like it. It's still a nice figure. Here we have this little Bandai Candy, Godzilla 1989. And despite this figure not scaling well with this figure at all, it's nice that this figure does scale well with this figure. You know, we have like the bigger proper scale and the smaller proper scale. I just think that's really cool. And of course, here we have some hand sanitizer. And here we have Dr. Billy Grant. So at the end of the day, should you get this figure? I'd say yes. I think the painting here is really nice. The articulation, I mean, it's a Bandai vinyl. What else do you expect? The sculpting is great and the detailing is phenomenal. And overall, this is just a really nice figure to have. And I'm also just really happy that, you know, we finally have like an affordable in-scale figure of Biollante that looks nice with all of my other Godzilla figures. That is something I've always wanted since I was a kid, so to finally have that now, it's a really cool feeling. Though, that being said, if you do decide to get this figure, then I'd say, like, you know, you might have trouble finding shelf space because this is, like, a pretty good-sized figure, but if you got that already, like, sorted out, then, yeah, I'd say definitely pick this figure up. Now, as far as price tags go, I paid a total of a little over $60 for this figure, which I'd say is a pretty fair asking price. You know, there are other Biollante figures that were made to be in scale with like other Godzilla figures. In fact, I remember, I forget when exactly, but it wasn't super long ago, they released the SH Monster Arts Biollante Special Color version. And that figure retailed for like, I think like $300 or something like that, which in my opinion is just absolutely insane, right? So $60 for this figure, I'd say that's a pretty fair asking price. You will definitely be paying more than $60, like, if you decide to import this figure. You know, because there's the shipping fee, which I used UPS, and I should also preface this by saying, I got this figure from the Japanese Godzilla store. And because Bai isn't working right now, or, I don't want to, well, as of me recording this video, Bai is not working with the Japanese Godzilla store. So I decided to use another proxy service, which was from Japan. And it worked really well. You know, the figure shipped out, like, not long after I pre-ordered it. And, like, it got here within, like, 5 days. You know, again, I used UPS. But, like, still, From Japan is also a pretty nice proxy service. So, you know, if, like, you know, if Bai still isn't working by the time I upload this video and or whenever you, the viewer, are watching this video, then I'd say try From Japan. There's also Zen Market that I probably should try, but I decided to go with From Japan. And, yeah. So, shipping, I paid like $50, so that's already like $110. And then I had to pay like an additional like $30 for like, you know, to get this figure through customs. So, in total, I paid like, I want to say like 140. So, yeah, you will definitely not be paying $60 for this figure if you decide to import it. This figure is available at Big Bad Toy Store for $100, so if you don't want to worry about, like, import fees or anything like that, then I'd say order this figure from there. But if you're impatient like me and you really wanted this figure, then you're going to have to just saddle up and pay the extra money. But that being said, the one thing I want to complain about is because when this figure went through customs, they, as I showed off at the beginning of this video, they cut into the box and they just, like, opened it. Which, to be fair, like, I get it, like, customs, like, they want to make sure that, like, drugs aren't being, like, snuck into the country, which, that's fair, But, like, for someone who's a collector, like, when I collect figures, I usually take them out of the box, Like, I like the box, but, like, I also just really want the figure, so I'll take it out of the box. So, for me, like, the damaged box wasn't really the end of the world. But I know there are collectors who do like to keep their figures in the box, and, if you're watching this and you are one of those collectors, then, like, just be warned, if you decide to import this figure, they might, like, cut into the box like they did with mine. Granted, I used UPS, so it might be different with, like, ECMS or FedEx or something like that, but as far as UPS goes, they will cut into the box, so just fair warning on that end, but I digress. So, if you want this figure now, import fees, like, in total, at least for me, you're going to be paying, like, $140, $130, something like that. But again, if you don't want to worry about import fees and you don't mind waiting, this figure is available at Big Bad Toy Store for a little over $100. So, do what you want, but either way, like, those are pretty much your two options. That being said, that is it for today. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Peace, Zack out.